Thank you very much. I think, in a space of about 1 year, when I was leading the Ministry of Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change, we've managed to put in, a strong framework with regards to the energy transition. Malaysia traditionally has been, like most countries in the world, have been very reliant on fossil fuels. We are an oil and gas producer. But we know that we need to transition to more new energy, and we've set a more ambitious target for 2050, where we will have 70% renewable energy capacity from the current 25%. At the same time, we've started with targeted subsidies, retargeting the subsidies for electricity. So previously, it was a blanket subsidy system. Electricity was very cheap in the country. Water was also very cheap, and we've started increasing the prices, particularly for the more wealthy segments of society and businesses. And we've seen that as a result, more and more people are putting up solar panels, using energy efficiency measures in order to cut their bills. We've also, managed to be very aggressive with regards to the carbon sinks that we have. Malaysia, we have a lot of tropical rainforests. The biodiversity that we have is, we are one of the 17 mega-diverse countries in the world. We are part of the Coral Triangle. So we have increased from 70 million ringgit in 2022 to paying 150 million ringgit ecological fiscal transfer to the various state governments for them to conserve their forests. For 2024, the Prime Minister has agreed to increase it to 200 million ringgit. So that's a massive, almost 3 times increase. And we've seen that a lot of the measures that we've done, our boots on the ground initiatives, where we have community rangers involving the indigenous communities, military veterans to guard our forests, we've seen the numbers go up from 1,000 to 2,000. And that has a major impact in cutting down, poaching, for example, our iconic Malayan tigers and other animals. And we've also tried to, move to upgrade the various legislations that we have to increase the penalties and punishments with regards to water pollution, infringement on forests, and so on and so forth. So overall, I think in the space of 1 year, that has been quite significant. There has been calls since 2019 for Malaysia to enact our own transboundary haze legislation similar to Singapore. And I understand why. I mean, as we know, Southeast Asia, we've been affected by serious haze problems, particularly during the El Nino years. In the 90s, we had that, in the 2000s and 2019. And again, we start to see it last year. So obviously, people are very unhappy when we had to close down schools or businesses were affected and so on and so forth. Obviously, the impact on health. So that was one route that we were exploring. The challenge has been that we look at what Singapore did as well, is that there is a challenge to enforce it. Because you have to rely, when we talk about transboundary haze, we are talking about a lot of plantations in our neighboring countries in ASEAN, in Indonesia, for example. And we have to be able to work with the local authorities. So we already have another, the transboundary haze pollution agreement at the ASEAN level, which was introduced in the early 2000s, and Malaysia was one of the first signatories to the agreement. And now, I think all of ASEAN has ratified it, but there is a criticism that it's not strong enough in terms of enforcement. So we are doing, we are looking at various angles. One is if we can upgrade the ASEAN agreement to have a stronger scientific panel, for example, so that it's not just the bureaucracy, but you get the science, just like we have with regards to climate change and whatnot. Or we can have some bilateral say Malaysia, Indonesia, to look at this issue. Or then the other one is on the transboundary haze legislation. So we are exploring at various angles. I understand that the people are very much they want a solution to this, but we will try to navigate the challenging diplomatic situation as well, with the end game of getting some improvements to the situation with regards to air quality in Malaysia. So we are exploring all angles. We've had our town hall sessions with the members of parliaments, with the civil society and whatnot, and we will continue to look at this in detail. And I think for us, we will look at the ASEAN angle with a lot of focus, because next year Malaysia will be chairing ASEAN. So I think what happened was that as in every situation when we face haze, our meteorological department will just look at the data that we have, and at that time the evidence was pointing to fires that were taking place in Indonesia, and that caused some controversy. But I think one is that I acknowledge that Indonesia has improved tremendously with regards to how they handle their fires, particularly in the peatlands. And I kept reminding, we have a lot of Malaysian companies operating plantations in Indonesia. So we keep telling them that please cooperate with the central government and the local governments there. And they have, overall, I think we've seen a lot of positive cooperation. So I think for us, it's not about finger pointing or looking to put blame, but at the end of the day, we know that when we talk about environmental issues, we know when we talk about air pollution issues, we've seen there is that US-Canada acid rain agreement. We need to look at it from a regional perspective. So we can't look at it at a traditional nation state angle, because the air is such that it crosses boundaries. And I think we immediately when that issue cropped up, I wrote a letter to my counterpart in Indonesia, and we actually offered our assistance if it's needed it's been done in the past to stop the fires from happening. And two is that I gave my commitment that Malaysia is open, that if any Malaysian companies are involved, then they should be subject to the full force of the law in Indonesia. So all of that is we made that commitment. And I'm trying not to make it into a diplomatic issue, but as a thing where we need to find common solutions. And I think this is where the challenge of ASEAN, where we've done well in the past, but now we need to upgrade ourselves in order to face the challenges of the 21st century. Well, ASEAN, the way we look at it, by 2030, we will be, if ASEAN is one economic unit, we will be the fourth biggest in the world by 2030. And we will have a population of 600 million, and that makes us a major player in the global stage. But the challenge is then we need to be able to do things together, and I think that is where it's not as easy, and especially traditionally ASEAN operates with what is called the ASEAN way. Which again worked well in the past, but now it needs to be looked at a different perspective. So I think that's the hope, because when we look at countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, these are all mega diverse countries. I mean, talking purely on the environment side, these are countries again where the Coral Triangle is, including with the Philippines. So if ASEAN, if we get our act together. Because one, we have these enormous carbon sinks, and at the same time we are developing very rapidly. So if we can develop in a more low carbon method, for example, and protect our carbon sinks as much as possible, then we will definitely be a major contributor to fight climate change in the world. But if ASEAN fails, if we develop like what the other countries have developed in the past, or if we just destroy our forests, then I don't think there's even any hope for the world because of the huge importance that ASEAN has in terms of solutions with regards to the planetary crisis. Well, we are submitting we are in the process of preparing our long-term low emissions development strategy, LTLETS, documentation. And I think that will be submitted very soon. We find that there's still a lot of gaps that we need to work on. And we definitely, I think, if anything, COP28 was a reminder that we need to do more. I think there has been progress, but definitely if we want to, within the science, when we talk about, keeping within the 1.5 degrees, then we have to do more. And I think that's where we will look at when our LT-LETS documentation is submitted, what more needs to be done, where we need to be more aggressive, and where it cannot be business as usual anymore in order for us to achieve. Because for Malaysia, we have that 2030 goal, but we also have that vision of being net zero earliest by 2050. I've said at COP28 in Dubai that, one, we accept the science. Two is that we are willing to be more ambitious, but we do need more support in whatever way from the developed world for us to achieve those targets. Because as I mentioned in my first day of becoming Minister of Environment, Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change, is that issue of balancing development and conservation, because we are still a middle income country. And a lot of Malaysians still need to come out from the poverty trap in order to have a good quality of life. So in order to have that balance, we need that assistance. We can't say stop growing our economy purely just to conserve our planet. I think there's been a lot of talk. Going even further back to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, of ecocide. People have spoken about that. Similarly, I think, if you look at Gaza, it's even more serious because it's a very densely populated, small, area of land with scarce water resources. The moment, it was already facing enormous challenges even before October 7th. But when the whole crisis started in October 2023, it has been driven to a whole new level. And I think we were encouraged by the fact that during COP28, many countries, not just from the Arab world or the Muslim world, but including from Africa, from Latin America, where they said that we can't ignore Gaza when we talk about climate change, right? So I think that's where there are other issues that are related to Gaza, but looking at the angle of being a climate or the environmental minister for Malaysia, I think the world has to acknowledge that, because we are starving, we are leaving the population of Gaza, they are totally exposed, without adequate source of water or access to wastewater, and I think solutions. So I think that is where the world needs to focus on. So if you take the climate angle out of the Gaza crisis, you won't be able to see the whole humanitarian tragedy for what it is. So I think the concern is that when we talk about net zero by a certain number of years, or we need to be climate resilient planet and whatnot, and yet we have this crisis that's happening before our eyes, with weapons that's coming from the developed world, and rendering the population of Gaza to be destitute. I think that is something that we cannot accept, and I think we want to bring that to the global discourse, and it's encouraging that it's happening, but it's not enough, because I think we need to look at the environmental and climate angle as well of the crisis in Gaza. You can't. I think when you talk about climate justice, and I think this is crucial. It's about acknowledging that, one, there are segments of society that have actually exceeded by far the planetary boundaries, We are talking about the 1%, in their private jets, with their massive spending and carbon footprints. But then on the other hand, you have huge segments of society, particularly in the developing world, but even within the developed world themselves. And obviously, Gaza is one of those societies where people are still not getting sufficient water, sufficient electricity, sufficient food. You can't go and tell them that, oh, please have less food or have less water just because the planet is already, bursting in its seams when they're not getting the bare minimum. Right, so I mean the whole idea of the donut economics by Kate Raworth. So I think that's where climate justice comes in, and definitely Gaza is crucial because or not, a lot of us in the developing world, maybe people like to point out that Malaysia is a high middle income country, but for us in the developing world where we've just started to exploit our resources, we've started to develop, we can only look at the sheer hypocrisy of the developed world that have done so much damage over 200 years, industrializing and whatnot, and now suddenly telling everyone to just, stop developing because of the planet. And I think that's where Gaza is crucial, because again, we don't see enough countries in the developed world that are putting that focus with regards to Gaza. Malaysia welcomes, I think, the development of COP28, the fact that this was the first, in over 30 years of climate summits, where the first time that fossil fuels is actually explicitly mentioned, is something that we need to transition away from. Even in Glasgow, it was only coal. Here, it was talked about fossil fuels in general. And people were very cynical and skeptical about this prior to the conclusion of the summit because of where it was held. But I think that was something that's significant. But definitely, is that enough? Or definitely, I think we need to do more. We just have to, for us in Malaysia, we will keep banging the drum with regards to climate justice, with regards to getting the developed world to do more. But on our own, we will continue to work on this because we know we've seen in the past that it's been some of these superpowers that have been denying climate science. We don't deny climate science. It's just that we need some room for us to develop, and at the same time to protect what we have. And I think we will continue to work on that. We welcome COP28, and we hope we have the next few COPs where Baku, and then the next one will be in Brazil. We hope that we can build on COP28, where to get the world to work harder. I think the challenge for Malaysia for so long was that we underpriced our utilities. Electricity, water, wastewater was too cheap. So obviously that was one of the things. How do you mitigate when you just can use as much electricity as you want, or now fuel is so cheap. So that's why the fact that we've started, when I was handling water and electricity, we started with those utilities, and now the government is looking at petrol as well in Malaysia. I think that's one, because the moment it's priced to market, then people will be able to behave accordingly. But obviously, that is only, pricing it in is only one part of the solution. The awareness part, I think, is also about developing alternatives. Things like public transport, electric vehicles. Those needs to be further developed. We are looking at that in a big way. But I think, without the alternatives being there, then, people will find, people still need to move around. They need to get their work done. And that's where we need to provide the solutions. But finally, I think it's about awareness. Finally, it's about, I like to point out how in Malaysia, unfortunately, it's during Ramadan that our food waste goes up. And we know in Ramadan, we are taught to be even more considerate, to be more conscious of waste, and all that, and greed. But yet, in Malaysia, it works the other way around. And I think it's not a particularly Malaysian problem. But I think that's where we need to relook things, where we need to understand that it's also about an issue of spiritual problem. It's also an issue of values. So we will engage. I mean, we've done the engagements with religious institutions, not just Muslims, but also, since Malaysia is very diverse with other faiths and religions, but also with schools, with universities. I think Malaysia is very proud that during COP28, we had a 12-year-old boy who spoke in front of everyone about his hopes and fears of the world. And I think, to engage with them, I think will be a major part so that they are more aware. And overall, I would say, and I think, just as we looked at what happened with regards to Greta Thunberg, it's not so much about building the awareness among the youths. They are actually quite aware. And in fact, they can be a driver for the older generation, to be aware. My son has been reminding me every day since I've been the Minister for Environment. Every time I use a plastic bottle, or every time he sees trees being cut, he'll just send me a message and he say, "You're not doing your job, Minister." Right? So I think that is the awareness among the youth, and we need to leverage on it to come up with even more ambitious. We shouldn't be scared to have more ambitious policies, because the younger generation actually, they want it. Yeah, I think we've seen, obviously Malaysia is a country that's used to being hot and humid, but it's been extra hot and humid in the last few years. Last year in particular, I think, we've seen it was the world's warmest year in record. I think Malaysia did not escape that. We had at least 2 children who died because of heat strokes, and that's not something we usually record in our statistics. So I think we need to be able. One is, of course, mitigation, but there's also adaptation. And I think one of the things that we realize is that the way we design our cities, the urban heat impact is very real in our cities, and I think now we need to look at it differently, preserve as much of things like, for example, urban forests. Previously, it was not really appreciated. It was just a piece of plantation land that's not been taken care of. But now, because of COVID and everything, people start to appreciate what they have, rather than going into the jungle further out of town, but they can have access to mountain hikes and trails within the city. And there's a lot of biodiversity there and whatnot. So I think these are things that we need to protect, and we need to even relook at our planning laws, where we want to protect as much of this as possible, because these are things that can overcome the urban heat island effect and other, even the way we dress. So just a short one. Traditionally, civil servants in Malaysia, the dress code is to wear a jacket, a suit with a tie. We are very British that way. Last year, when I was pushing the energy efficiency legislation, so I was talking about putting our aircons at 24 degrees Celsius, and we managed to now allow everyone to wear our batik shirt. Just like Indonesia, we want to make batik shirt a choice for anyone to wear it every day, and I try to do that as well. And because that's more suited, and it's suited to our climate, so that has been happening. And I think people say that it's something very small and symbolic, but we've seen Japan. They've done that with the Cool Breeze effort, where they've cut down on the dress codes and whatnot during summer. So Malaysia, we have summer all year round. It doesn't make sense that this is our standard dress code for every day at work. So I think those things are, we are pushing things through to adapt to the new realities. One of the approach is that, previously there has been a lot of focus with regards to mitigation. So now we are developing our national adaptation plan to deal with floods. Malaysia, we've had a long history because of our high rainfall. Traditionally, obviously, our adaptation method was to build a house on stilts. That was the traditional homes. Now we don't. But then we use a lot of grey infrastructure. One of the renowned projects in Kuala Lumpur was to have this project where we had a highway combined with a stormwater tunnel called the Smart Tunnel. So it's paid by the cars that are using it, but it's also used to carry water and prevent flooding in downtown Kuala Lumpur, and that's been very effective. But what we've seen is that, as we've seen that the intensity of rain, things that people say will happen once in 100 years are happening every other year. So as a result, we know that there's a limitation to grey infrastructure. So we need grey infrastructure, but we need to combine it with nature-based solutions and things like sponge cities, preserving more and more permeable surface to absorb water, storing water to be used for drinking, for example, and rainwater harvesting and all sorts of things. So that's there. Some of it has been done or it's in the works, and others are being planned. And I think now that we're looking at it differently, I can't say that there will be no floods, but hopefully we can adapt better. We are even, something as simple as the flood hazard map. So basically, previously developers were against this because it will impact the prices of homes that they were trying to sell. Because if the prices of flats is not included in the insurance and whatnot, then it's easier for them to sell. But now we've managed to pass that. So then rather than putting all the burden on the government to help the victims, it also means they are already insured if anything happens and the proper risks are put in. So it's a multidimensional approach. And it's a very serious problem, like you said. And yes, we have had floods over the years, but what is crucial to see is that even in the East Coast areas, for example, we see floods happening where people are not used to floods. Where people are used to floods is different. They're psychologically prepared. They have boats. Their homes are built in such a way. But where people are not used to floods, then the impact is worse. So these are things that we realize because of climate change, and that's why we have a multi-dimensional approach. I think one of the things is that we have to realize that we have to exploit some of it, because it's easy to be on a pedestal and say, okay, let's not touch anything and just preserve it. But at the same time, you have people who are maybe trying to escape poverty, who are living in the margins or the borders of forests and whatnot, and they need jobs as well. So what we've done, for example, I give you something that's very popular or very misunderstood, is palm oil. So most of Malaysian palm oil is already sustainably certified. So it's sustainable palm oil, and we know that palm oil is the most efficient vegetable fat there is. Yeah. So we've done that, and I think that deserves more recognition from the world. We can't get chocolates that say no palm oil free anymore. And two is that forest is also certified where we exploit the timber. So we want to ensure that it's harvested properly, because we also know that the market is much more demanding. But most importantly, we want to guard the resources that we have. And minerals, traditionally we've had a lot of tin, bauxite, and all sorts of minerals. But this time around, Malaysia is also home to a lot of rare earths. And, these strategic minerals are very much demanded, ironically, because of the move towards renewable energy and electrification. So should we exploit it? Yes, but we have to do it in a sustainable manner, and that's where the government is working very hard, to develop a rare earth industry where we do not want to export raw rare earth. We want to process it, and we want to be able to supply it to our own, say, automotive industry and whatnot that we have in Malaysia and some other neighboring countries. So I think, but we will obviously have to be careful. Because if we lose sight of what's being done, and it's happened in the past, then suddenly we see a lot of these natural resources are exploited without proper sustainability measures in place. And we just see, basically, as one former deputy prime minister described our timber industry those days, that, we were raping our forests, and we can't have that anymore. So I think that's where we need to be very careful. Legislation has to be proper. The challenge is that a lot of this requires coordination between the federal government and the state governments. But a lot of them now appreciate the need to do it in a better way.